Our next storyteller is Dr. Paul Chelminski. When Dr. Chelminski was 18, he spent a summer as a jug hustler. And if you guys don't know what a jug hustler is, because I also don't know, I think we're about to find out.
Thank you for having me today. I'm a professor of medicine here at UNC. And I accepted this invitation to speak before I was invited to address the healthcare system board today at lunch. So I did practice for this speech, that speech, and not this one. So I'm going to use a few notes. And you know, we can stop this talk immediately if someone here can tell me what a jug hustler is, and then I'll buy you dinner and I'll just go home. In fact, I'll buy you dinner with your partner, not even with me. Because a jug hustler sounds like something, you know, maybe a minor player, at best, a minor player in a Cajun band. But at worst, just, you know, I won't even say what it sounds like. So, I didn't even know tonight's topic was going to be called growing pains. And this is really about what happened to an 18-year-old boy, which was very typical for 18-year-old boys and girls in our country. You know, many cultures have rites of passage. America is a young culture, and we don't have any national rites of passage. When I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Mali in the 1980s, there were circumcision cohorts. The boys had these cohorts, and they went off and they got circumcised under kind of medically gruesome scenarios, but it was about building culture, building links to the community. Maybe in some of our sub-communities, subcultures like the Jewish community, we have rites of passage. I mean, bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs, and I'm not Jewish, but I certainly get invited to a lot of those. But what we have instead are coming of age stories, but they're very different. They're really the individual divorced from her or his usual family community ties and bonds. And one of the things we've done in this country is that we've made a literature out of this. The two books I know about are The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and Holden and Catcher in the Rye. They really are a substitute for rites of passage, and it's an important contribution to world literature, because one of the things that's always struck me about the Old Testament and the New Testament and other forms of scripture, there are very few perspectives of children. And even other cultures don't offer this to us. So this is my story as a jug hustler in northeastern France. Does anyone know what it is yet? Probably even if you Googled it, you wouldn't get it. So, in 1981, right before I went to Duke, my father, where I majored in medieval and Renaissance studies, my father got me a job on our oil exploration crew in northeastern France in the Franche-Comté as a jug hustler. And I can't promise you everything I'm going to tell you about this summer is savory, but it was, some of it's very uncomfortable and nasty, but it was a rite of passage. I was divorced from my usual family and cultural links, and remember, in 1981, there were only unreliable long-distance phone links to the United States, and if I wanted to call my parents, it literally cost me $70 for 30 minutes, and they let me know that. And there were no credit cards in my family, so I was really cast off. I arrived in France, and Jean Roudaz, a friend of my father's an exploration geophysicist, meets me, and I'm put on a team, a jug hustling team for the Compagnie Générale de Géophysique in northeastern France. And I'm not going to tell you what a jug hustler is yet, but the first thing that happens is that I meet a cultural stereotype. Jean Roudaz's wife, this is 1981, greets me and kisses me and is very effusive about the fact that she remembers when the GIs gave her chewing gum at the end of World War II. And this was incredibly embarrassing for me, but much more embarrassing for Jean Roudaz, because, you know, my father's generation, I wasn't even alive when that happened. It was very embarrassing for him. So once the first introduction, the power of stereotypes, and I don't chew gum. So my first week on the job in northeastern France, I'm put on a small pickup truck, which is about as big as some of the bathrooms, the back of it, in the old clinic building, but with no windows. And I was with a Frenchman, and this was the explosives team. And the explosives team, there were spools and spools of plastic explosives around us, and one Frenchman chain smoking the whole time. And when he would finish a cigarette, he would put it out on the ground and just go like this. He said, "You need a blasting cap for an explosion to occur." So I had to trust in him, and really, as I know now, the greatest risk to me was the chain smoking. And what the purpose of these explosives was to generate sound waves, usually in a pristine wheat field, in order to see what the subterranean layers look like to prospect for oil. A week after that, they took me off that. I said, "Well, why'd you take me off that?" They said, "Well, you know, that's potentially dangerous work. It's better for Algerians." Okay. Well, you know, and I have no connection. I can't complain to anyone. I can't register a protest, and my French is abysmal. So, but I understood what that meant. So I was put on the real jug hustling team, which meant that I went up mountains with bandoliers of about 80 pounds of cables and sonograms that we would put in the ground so that these would measure the explosions or the vibrations to look for the underground substrata. They probably weren't looking for oil. The French were looking where to store their nuclear waste, is what I was told. But I was exposed to another side of a gritty French culture. The guys were roughnecks. They'd been unemployed coal miners, and they spent their whole day drinking in the back of these trucks and just littering all over this pristine French landscape. And littering and littering and littering. And they were always testing me, and because I was an American, I was 18, and I'd done upper body sports, I could usually handle these guys in wrestling. But a few times it almost came to fist fights, and I realized that the day was going to come when I was probably going to end up having a fist fight with one of these guys. You know, they had bad teeth, unemployed coal miners. This was the worst work you could get in France. The fist fight never happened. And that was because one day we were picnicking in the French countryside, and these guys were littering away bottles and wine bottles and beer bottles and wrappers. And they were throwing their beer bottles away. And one of them said American, using a derogatory form of American, he said, "Throw this bottle." So I'm an American. I had not grown up with leg sports. I've grown up with arm sports. And I took a beer bottle and I threw it clear over a tall tree. And I'd been a baseball player, and these guys stopped. And they looked at me and they kept handing me beer bottles and said, "You can't do that again." But your learning point here is that this is a perfect example of confirmation bias and the halo effect. Because just because I could throw a beer bottle over a tree, they thought I had supernatural powers. It was like the Connecticut Yankee in Mark Twain's book predicting the solar eclipse, the lunar eclipse that saved his life. Halo effect, and I never ended up getting into a fist fight. We're getting towards the end here. There are lots of stories. But who would have thought the redemptive power of littering? We don't talk about that enough, no, do we? Finally, about 6 weeks into these 10 weeks, Pascal, the driver, on our van, and these roads were narrow in the Franche-Comté. I find him in the back of the van with me with the cables and the sonograms, and I said, and I asked some of the more educated French guys, "Why is Pascal back here? He's been drinking." I said, "Well, I know that. He's been drinking all summer." And he said, "Well, no, he's been drinking too much." And I said, "Well, what? Tell me." They said, 7 liters a day. And so a liter of beer is 3 regular beers. So, but this was his Lantis alcohol intake. Because I can tell you, in addition to 7 liters, we stopped at bars about 5 or 6 times a day and get a coup de rouge, il faut boire un coup, and we were just drinking wine all day long. And needless to say, I got really big and strong from all that wine and carrying stuff. I put on about 30 pounds. I looked like a weightlifter when I came in. And obviously, the risk didn't. In fact, as it turns out, the irony is this Algerian gentleman got the better end of the deal, because being in this truck with a man drinking 21 beers a day plus wine was the riskier place to be. So to end it up, the power of culture. 2 stories. At the end of the time, to make it brief, I got on the wrong train. I slept through a train stop, and I ended up in the south of France. And I had no money. I only had change in my pocket. And my uncle Rudolph was a very famous food critic in France, an American. And I couldn't have I didn't have money for a train ticket. And and a French contrôleur on the train, he cut me some wrist. He said, there's going to be no contrôleur on this train back to Lyon. You can get to Lyon and then you're on your own. So I put all the money I had in the phone machine. And I called my Uncle Rudy, and he said, okay. He gave me directions. I walked into a French restaurant, and a very gracious French woman came up to me, and matronly and refined, and she said, are you hungry and thirsty? And I said, yeah, I'm really thirsty. And she said, what would you like? And I said, du lait. I said, just some milk. And so she gave me milk, and then she fronted me several hundred francs, and I got back to where Well, as it turns out, this story about Paul Chelminski getting milk is famous now, because it reinforced the stereotype. I turned out to walked into a Michelin 2-star restaurant. I could have had anything I wanted. And the power of my culture was just we are captives of our culture, was to order milk. And the message I will tell you as you're becoming clinicians, and I'm finishing here, was that what I appreciate most is that you are expected to know a lot, but what we steal from you is your power to observe and to listen. And that's what I love most about my job, is just observing and listening all the time. Thank you.